The thunderous crack of a rifle echoed through the dusty plains as Sophia Fairchild ducked behind the stagecoach, her heart pounding against her ribs. This wasn't what she had signed up for when she'd taken her sister's place as a mail-order bride bound for Arizona territory. The year was 1885, and Sophia's journey west had just taken a dangerous turn. "Get down, miss," the driver shouted, his weathered face contorted with alarm as another bullet whizzed past, kicking up dirt near her skirts. Sophia pressed herself against the coach wheel, clutching the letter that had changed her destiny. The paper was worn from countless readings, the elegant script of her sister Eleanor faded at the creases. Eleanor had arranged to marry a rancher in Camp Verde, Arizona territory, until typhoid had claimed her life just 2 weeks before her departure date. The stagecoach robbery happening around her seemed almost fitting, another unexpected detour in a journey that wasn't supposed to be hers. 3 masked men on horseback circled the coach, demanding valuables from the terrified passengers. "Hand over your money and jewelry, and nobody gets hurt," one of the bandits commanded, his voice muffled beneath a dusty bandana. Sophia's fingers tightened around the small brooch, pinned to her traveling dress, the only piece of jewelry she owned, a parting gift from her late mother. She couldn't bear to part with it, but before she could make a decision, the thunder of approaching hoofbeats cut through the chaos. "Riders coming," shouted one of the robbers, wheeling his horse around. The rapid gunfire that followed sent Sophia pressing her face into her hands, praying silently. When she dared to look again, the bandits were retreating in a cloud of dust, and a trio of riders approached the coach. The lead rider dismounted with fluid grace. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. When he lifted his gaze to meet hers, Sophia was struck by eyes the color of a summer sky, clear and piercing. "Are you folks all right?" he asked, his voice carrying the slight drawl of someone who'd spent years under western skies. The driver nodded, thanking the man and his companions. "Mighty fine timing, Mr. McKenzie." The tall man turned his attention to Sophia, who was still trembling slightly as she attempted to brush the dust from her traveling dress. "Madam," he said with a slight tip of his hat, "you're shaking. Are you hurt?" "No," Sophia replied, trying to steady her voice. "Just rattled." "I'm not accustomed to highway robbery." A slight smile crossed his face. "Not many people are. Yates McKenzie," he introduced himself, extending a hand to help her up. "Those men have been causing trouble along this route for weeks now." "Sophia Fairchild," she replied, accepting his assistance and noting the strength in his calloused hand. Recognition flashed in his eyes. "Fairchild, would you be heading to Camp Verde by any chance?" Her breath caught. "Yes, I am." "How did you—" "I believe I'm the one who's supposed to meet you," he said, studying her with a curious intensity. "Though I wasn't expecting. That is, the name I was given was Eleanor." The moment of truth had arrived sooner than Sophia had anticipated. She swallowed hard, glancing at the other passengers who were now watching their exchange with interest. "Perhaps we could discuss this privately," she suggested, her voice barely audible above the whisper of the wind. Yates McKenzie nodded, his expression unreadable. "My ranch is half a day's ride from here. I've got a wagon in town for your things." He turned to the driver. "Pete, I'll take Miss Fairchild from here if that's agreeable." The stagecoach driver tipped his hat. "Seems proper enough, seeing as you're her intended." The words sent a flutter of anxiety through Sophia's chest. Her intended. Except he wasn't not hers. He was Eleanor's. And soon she would have to explain why Eleanor wasn't the one standing before him. The remainder of the journey into the small town of Willow Creek was made in silence, with Yates riding alongside the stagecoach. Sophia used the time to gather her courage, rehearsing explanations in her mind, none of which seemed adequate for the deception she was perpetrating. When they reached town, Yates helped her down from the coach and instructed one of his men to collect her trunk. "We'll stop for a meal before heading to Camp Verde," he said. "The journey's another few hours." The local establishment, proudly named the Frontier House, was modest but clean. Yates secured them a table in a quiet corner, far from curious ears. After ordering 2 plates of stew, he fixed those penetrating blue eyes on her. "Now," he said quietly, "would you care to explain why Eleanor Fairchild has suddenly become Sophia?" Sophia's hands trembled as she removed her gloves. "Mr. Mackenzie," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I'm afraid I have difficult news. Eleanor was my sister." His expression remained impassive, but something flickered in his eyes. "Was. She fell ill with typhoid fever 6 weeks ago." Sophia forced herself to continue, the grief still raw. She didn't survive. She passed away 2 weeks before her scheduled departure." Yates sat back in his chair, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said after a moment, his tone genuine. "But that doesn't explain why you're here in her place." Sophia took a deep breath. "Before she died, Eleanor made me promise that I would fulfill her commitment to you. She was worried about the money you'd sent for her passage. Our family couldn't repay it. We've fallen on hard times since our father's passing." The admission brought heat to her cheeks. "I wrote to inform you of the change, but I suppose my letter didn't reach you in time." "No," he said, "it didn't." The server arrived with their meals, providing a momentary reprieve from the intensity of their conversation. Sophia was grateful for the interruption, using the time to collect her thoughts. When they were alone again, Yates spoke. "So you came in her place out of obligation, to honor a debt?" "Partly," Sophia admitted, "but also because Eleanor believed this was a chance for a new beginning. She spoke so highly of your correspondence, of the life you described." She hesitated. "There's nothing left for me in Boston. Our family home was sold to pay Father's debts, and I've been working as a seamstress, barely earning enough to survive." Yates studied her, his expression softening slightly. "You didn't think to simply write and explain the situation." "I did write," Sophia repeated. "And I was prepared to return what I could of the passage money once I found work out west. But Eleanor was so certain this was the right path." She looked down at her barely touched stew. "I understand if you wish to nullify the agreement. I'm not the bride you were expecting." Yates was quiet for so long that Sophia finally raised her eyes to meet his. What she saw there surprised her, not anger or disappointment, but thoughtful consideration. "Did your sister ever share my letters with you?" he asked suddenly. "Yes," Sophia said. "She read them aloud often. She was quite taken with your descriptions of the ranch and the surrounding countryside." "And did she share her letters to me?" Sophia shook her head. "No, those were private. She would only tell me afterward what she'd written about." A strange smile touched his lips. "Miss Fairchild, I believe there's something you should know." He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small, folded photograph. "This was sent to me by your sister. It arrived about 3 months ago." He slid the photograph across the table. Sophia picked it up with trembling fingers and gasped when she saw it was a portrait of herself, taken the previous year. "I don't understand," she whispered, staring at her own image. The letter accompanying it explained that while the correspondence had been from Eleanor, the agreement was always meant to be for you. Yates said quietly. "Eleanor wrote that she was orchestrating this match on your behalf, with your eventual consent, of course. She described you as stubborn and proud, unlikely to accept charity or arranged marriage, but deserving of a chance at happiness." Sophia's mind reeled. memories of her sister's enthusiasm about the Western match taking on new meaning. But why would she deceive both of us this way? According to her final letter, she planned to reveal everything to you before your departure. She wrote that she'd been diagnosed with a heart condition and wasn't expected to live long enough to make the journey herself. His expression was gentle. It seems the typhoid merely hastened what she already knew was coming. Tears welled in Sophia's eyes as the realization dawned. Eleanor had been protecting her, creating an opportunity for her long before the illness had taken hold. "I had no idea," she whispered. "All this time, I thought I was taking her place, fulfilling her dream. When your letter didn't arrive and I saw you step off that stage." Yates paused. "I knew immediately who you were from the photograph. I was confused why you introduced yourself as Sophia rather than Eleanor, but I figured there was an explanation." He reached across the table, his large hand covering hers. "You're not replacing anyone, Miss Fairchild. You're the one I've been corresponding with all along, even if the name on the letters was different. You're the one I wanted to meet." Sophia stared at him, stunned by this revelation. "But you don't know me." "I know what your sister told me about you, that you're intelligent, resourceful, and brave. That you took care of her during your father's illness, that you learned to manage a household when your mother passed." His voice was soft. "And I know that you traveled over 2,000 miles to honor what you thought was your sister's wish, despite the danger and uncertainty. That tells me more about your character than 100 letters could." The stew grew cold as they talked, Sophia asking questions about the ranch while Yates inquired about her journey. There was an ease between them that surprised her, a sense of familiarity that defied their brief acquaintance. As afternoon shadows lengthened across the wooden floor, Yates finally pushed back his chair. "We should get on the road if we want to reach Camp Verde before dark. I have a wagon outside for your things." Sophia gathered her courage. "Mr. McKenzie, I need to ask, what happens now?" "The arrangement was for marriage, but given the circumstances, the arrangement," he interrupted gently, "was for you to come to Camp Verde to see if we might suit one another. Your sister was very clear that nothing was to be forced or hurried." He stood, offering her his hand. "I suggest we honor her wishes. You'll stay at my ranch as planned. Mrs. Hollister, my housekeeper, will serve as chaperone. We'll take the time to become acquainted properly and then, well, we'll see where that leads." Relief flooded through her. "That sounds very reasonable." "I'm occasionally capable of reason," he said with a smile that transformed his serious face, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "Though my brother might argue the point." The wagon was waiting outside, her trunk already loaded. As Yates helped her onto the seat, his hand strong and steady at her waist, Sophia felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps Eleanor had known exactly what she was doing after all. The journey to Camp Verde took them through stunning landscape, with red rock formations rising majestically against the blue sky and vast stretches of open country, dotted with scrub and cactus. It was nothing like the crowded streets of Boston, with their narrow horizons and sooty air. "It's beautiful," Sophia murmured as they crested a rise that revealed a verdant valley below, a ribbon of blue water cutting through the greenery. "The Verde River," Yates explained, slowing the team, "makes this land some of the most fertile in the territory. My grandfather staked his claim here 30 years ago. Started with a few head of cattle and built it into something that could sustain generations." There was pride in his voice, and something else, a deep connection to the land that Sophia had never experienced in her urban life. "Your letters mention that your brother runs the ranch with you," she prompted. "Samuel," Yates confirmed. 4 years younger but thinks he knows everything. He manages the cattle operation while I handle the horses." We've developed a reputation for breeding some of the finest quarter horses in the territory." As he spoke of the ranch, his face animated with passion and purpose, Sophia found herself studying him more carefully. He was handsome in a rugged way, with strong features bronzed by the sun and laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled more often than she'd yet witnessed. His hands were capable and strong on the reins, and though his clothing was practical rather than fashionable, there was a quiet dignity in his bearing. "What about you, Miss Fairchild?" he asked, breaking into her thoughts. "Your sister mentioned you were skilled with a needle and thread." "I worked as a seamstress after my father's death," she confirmed. "Before that, I assisted in managing our household. My mother ensured I was well educated, perhaps too well for a woman of my station, according to some in Boston society." "And what sort of education was that?" "Literature, mathematics, some science and history. I read whatever I could get my hands on." She smiled at a memory. "My father used to say my curiosity would be the ruin of me, but he never discouraged it." "Out here, practical knowledge is valued above all," Yates said. "But there's always use for a quick mind. The ranch accounts could benefit from someone with a head for figures." As they talked, the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. Sophia was so entranced by the spectacle that she almost missed Yates's announcement. "We're here." The ranch came into view as they rounded a bend in the road, a sprawling main house of weathered wood and stone, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn. In the distance, cattle grazed on expansive pastureland that stretched toward the mountains. "Welcome to Singing Springs Ranch," Yates said, a note of pride in his voice. As they approached, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. She was middle-aged, with graying hair pulled back in a severe bun, but her face broke into a warm smile as the wagon drew near. "Mrs. Hollister," Yates called as he brought the team to a halt. "We have a guest." The housekeeper approached, curiosity evident in her shrewd gaze. "This would be Miss Fairchild, then?" she asked, her accent revealing Eastern origins. "Sophia Fairchild," Yates confirmed, jumping down from the wagon and coming around to help Sophia descend. "There's been a change of plans. Miss Eleanor Fairchild has passed away. This is her sister, Sophia." Mrs. Hollister's eyes widened. "Oh, my dear, I am sorry for your loss." She shot a questioning look at Yates, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. Whatever silent communication passed between them seemed to satisfy the housekeeper. "Well, you must be exhausted from your journey. Come inside, and I'll show you to your room. Supper will be ready shortly." Sophia followed the older woman into the house, momentarily overwhelmed by the reality of her situation. She was thousands of miles from everything familiar, in the home of a man she'd just met, about to begin a life she'd never planned for herself. The interior of the ranch house was surprisingly refined, with polished wooden floors, comfortable furnishings, and shelves lined with books. Mrs. Hollister led her up a staircase to a pleasant bedroom at the back of the house, overlooking a garden and the mountains beyond. "The bathroom is down the hall," she explained. "I've had hot water brought up for washing. Your trunk will be up shortly." She hesitated, studying Sophia with kind eyes. Mr. McKenzie explained the situation. "Yes," Sophia said. "It seems my sister arranged more than I realized." Mrs. Hollister nodded. "He's a good man, Miss Fairchild, one of the best I've known. I've kept house for the McKenzies since Yates was a boy." Her expression turned maternal. "Whatever circumstances brought you here, I hope you'll give this place and him a fair chance." "I intend to," Sophia assured her. "Thank you for your kindness." Left alone, Sophia moved to the window, gazing out at the spectacular sunset painting the mountains in hues of purple and gold. The vastness of the landscape was both intimidating and exhilarating. For the first time since Eleanor's death, since the desperate decision to honor her sister's commitment, Sophia felt a sense of possibility rather than obligation. A soft knock at the door announced the arrival of her trunk, carried by a young ranch hand who blushed furiously when she thanked him. Once he departed, Sophia unpacked her modest wardrobe, hanging dresses in the cedar wardrobe and placing her few personal belongings on the dresser. Among them was a small portrait of Eleanor, her sweet face forever captured in a moment of happiness before illness had claimed her. "You always were looking out for me, weren't you?" Sophia whispered to the image. "Even when I thought I was the one protecting you." After washing away the dust of travel and changing into a simple blue dress, Sophia made her way downstairs. She found Yates in what appeared to be a study, standing before a large map mounted on the wall. "Our property," he explained when he noticed her presence. "Nearly 10,000 acres stretching from the river to the foothills." "It's impressive," Sophia said, moving closer to examine the map. "You've built quite a legacy. My grandfather started it. My father expanded it." A shadow crossed his face. "Now it's up to Samuel and me to preserve it for the next generation." Before Sophia could respond, a new voice interrupted. "So this is the mail-order bride." A man stood in the doorway, his resemblance to Yates unmistakable despite being slightly shorter and more compactly built. Where Yates's eyes were blue, this man's were hazel and his hair was a shade darker, but the strong jaw and straight nose marked them as brothers. "Samuel," Yates said, his tone carrying a warning. "This is Miss Sophia Fairchild. Miss Fairchild, my brother, Samuel McKenzie." Samuel stepped forward, studying her with undisguised curiosity. "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Fairchild. I must say, when Yates told me he was sending for a bride from back east, I had my doubts. Didn't think a city girl would last a week out here." His gaze swept over her, assessing. "But you look made of sturdier stuff than I expected." "Sam," Yates growled. Sophia lifted her chin. "I assure you, Mr. McKenzie, what I lack in frontier experience I make up for in determination. I wouldn't have traveled this far if I weren't committed to succeeding here." A grin broke across Samuel's face. "Well, I'll be. She's got spirit, Yates. Maybe this wasn't such a fool notion after all." He offered Sophia a slight bow. "Welcome to Singing Springs, Miss Fairchild. I look forward to seeing how you fare among us wild Westerners. Dinner is served, Mrs." Hollister announced from the doorway, saving Sophia from having to respond to Samuel's baiting. The dining room was warm and inviting, with a large oak table set with simple but elegant dinnerware. The meal consisted of succulent roast beef, potatoes, fresh vegetables, and warm bread far more substantial than the meager portions Sophia had grown accustomed to in her struggling days as a seamstress. Conversation flowed surprisingly easily, with Samuel proving less abrasive than his introduction suggested. He regaled Sophia with tales of ranch life, from cattle drives to encounters with local wildlife, while Yates occasionally interjected to correct his brother's more outlandish claims. "Don't believe half of what he tells you," Yates advised with a fond look at his brother. "Sam fancies himself quite the storyteller." "The best stories have a grain of truth," Samuel protested. "Like the time Yates got himself treed by that mountain lion. That really happened, though he'll never admit how loud he screamed." "I was 15, Yates said dryly, "and it wasn't screaming so much as strategic yelling to alert the ranch hands." Sophia found herself laughing, drawn into the easy camaraderie between the brothers. It reminded her of the relationship she'd shared with Eleanor, that mixture of affectionate teasing and underlying loyalty. After dinner, they retired to the sitting room, where Samuel excused himself to check on a mare about to foal, leaving Sophia alone with Yates. "Your brother is quite a character," she observed as Yates poured her a small glass of sherry. "He's the charming one," Yates agreed, settling into an armchair across from her. "Always has been, makes friends wherever he goes while He shrugged. "I tend to keep my own counsel." "Yet you're the one who decided to advertise for a bride," Sophia pointed out. "That seems rather bold for someone who keeps to himself." A thoughtful expression crossed his face. "The ranch needs a woman's touch, has since our mother passed 10 years ago, and He seemed to search for the right words. "I suppose I was tired of solitude. There aren't many suitable prospects in Camp Verde or the surrounding areas." "So you cast your net wider," Sophia said softly. "I did." His eyes met hers, direct and honest. "I didn't expect to find someone like you, though." The compliment brought warmth to her cheeks. "You hardly know me, Mr. McKenzie." "Yates, please," he corrected. "And that's true enough. But I'm a decent judge of character, Miss Fairchild, had to be in my line of work. Some men can look you in the eye while plotting to steal your cattle or cheat you at cards." "And what does your judgment tell you about me?" she asked, curious despite herself. He studied her for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. "That you're brave, resourceful, loyal, given what you were willing to do for your sister's memory." A smile touched his lips. "And that you're curious about everything. You haven't stopped observing since you arrived, taking in every detail, asking questions with your eyes even when you're silent." Sophia was startled by his perception. "You're very observant yourself, comes with the territory." He set his glass aside. "Tomorrow, if you're not too tired from your journey, I thought I might show you around the ranch, give you a better sense of what life here entails." "I'd like that very much," Sophia said, genuinely interested. As the evening drew to a close, Mrs. Hollister appeared to escort Sophia back to her room, maintaining the proprieties that Yates had promised to observe. "Sleep well, Miss Fairchild," he said, rising as she prepared to depart. "The Arizona nights can be cool, but there are extra blankets in the chest at the foot of your bed." "Thank you," she replied, "for everything. Your understanding and hospitality have been more than I dared hope for." After Mrs. Hollister had seen her settled, Sophia sat at the window of her room, watching the star-filled sky. So different from Boston, where buildings and smog obscured much of the heavens. Here, the Milky Way stretched across the darkness like a river of light, breathtaking in its clarity. The enormity of the changes in her life struck her anew. Just weeks ago, she'd been in a cramped apartment in Boston, mourning Eleanor and facing a future of endless toil and loneliness. Now she was in Arizona territory, in a beautiful ranch home, being courted for that's what it was. She realized by a man of substance and character. Eleanor's final gift to her was more precious than she could have imagined. Morning came with the crowing of a rooster and the gentle illumination of sunrise through her bedroom window. Sophia, dressed in her most practical outfit, a simple skirt and shirtwaist in a sturdy cotton, and pinned her hair in a style that would stay neat under a hat. Mrs. Hollister had breakfast waiting: eggs, bacon, biscuits with honey, and coffee rich with cream. Yates joined her, freshly shaven and dressed in clean work clothes, his manner slightly reserved, as if the ease of the previous evening had given way to self-consciousness in the light of day. "I thought we'd start with a tour of the main buildings," he said as they finished breakfast, "then ride out to see some of the property if you're comfortable on horseback." "I learned to ride in the city parks," Sophia admitted, "though I imagine Western riding is quite different." "We'll find you a gentle mount," he assured her, the warmth returning to his eyes. Daisy is a sweet-tempered mare who'll take good care of you. The morning tour revealed a working ranch in full operation. Sophia met the foreman, a weathered man named Tucker who'd been with the McKenzies for 20 years, along with several cowhands who tipped their hats respectfully. The blacksmith, a massive man named Jonas with arms like tree trunks, was shoeing a horse when they visited the smithy, the rhythmic clanging of his hammer punctuating their conversation. The ranch employs 15 men year-round, Yates explained as they walked toward the stables, with another 10 or so during roundup and branding season. Most bunk in the bunkhouse, though a few of the married men have small cabins on the property. It's like a small village, Sophia observed, impressed by the organization required to keep such an operation running smoothly. That's not far wrong, Yates agreed. We grow most of our own food, repair our own equipment, doctor our own livestock, and even our own people when necessary. Town's too far for minor emergencies. In the stables, he introduced her to Daisy, a dappled gray mare with gentle eyes who nuzzled Sophia's palm when offered an apple. She likes you, Yates said, saddling a spirited bay stallion for himself. Horses are good judges of character. Once mounted, they set off at a leisurely pace, Yates keeping his stallion in check to stay alongside Sophia. The day was perfect for riding clear skies with a light breeze that carried the scent of sage and wildflowers. They rode past fields where cattle grazed, through a stand of cottonwood trees that provided welcome shade, and finally to a rise that overlooked a spectacular vista of the Verde Valley. "This is my favorite spot on the ranch," Yates said, dismounting and helping Sophia down from her saddle. "You can see almost the entire property from here." They stood side by side, taking in the panoramic view. Below them, the ranch buildings looked like toys, and the ribbon of the Verde River glistened in the sunlight. In the distance, mountains rose in purple majesty against the azure sky. "It's breathtaking," Sophia said, genuinely awed. "I've never seen anything like it. When my grandfather first came here, this land was considered worthless by most," Yates told her, pride evident in his voice. "Too far from anywhere," they said. But he saw its potential: the river for water, the valley for grazing, the mountains for protection. He turned to face her. "It takes vision to see what something could become, not just what it is." His words hung in the air between them, and Sophia wondered if he was speaking of more than just the land. "Your grandfather was a wise man," she said softly. "He was," Yates agreed. "Taught me everything I know about ranching, about horses, about being a man of my word." He gestured toward a small grove of trees in the distance. "He's buried over there, along with my grandmother and my parents. Mackenzies have put down deep roots here." The personal revelation touched Sophia. "Thank you for sharing this place with me. I wanted you to understand what you'd be part of," he said, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "If you decide to stay." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken possibilities. Sophia found herself studying his face, the strong line of his jaw, the tiny scar near his right eyebrow, the way the corners of his eyes crinkled when he was thoughtful. "We should head back," he said finally, breaking the spell. "Mrs. Hollister will have lunch waiting." The ride back to the ranch was companionable, with Yates pointing out features of the landscape and sharing stories of his childhood adventures with Samuel. By the time they returned to the stables, Sophia felt as though she'd gained insights into both the man and the place he called home. The days that followed fell into a pleasant rhythm. Mornings were spent learning about the ranch operations, with Yates patiently explaining everything from the breeding program for the horses to the seasonal cattle rotations. Afternoons often found Sophia helping Mrs. Hollister with household tasks, or exploring the ranch's extensive library, which contained everything from practical manuals on animal husbandry to leather-bound volumes of Shakespeare and Dickens. In the evenings, the household would gather for dinner, with Samuel providing entertainment through his stories and good-natured teasing. Occasionally, neighbors from surrounding ranches would visit, curious about the Eastern woman who had come to Singing Springs. Through it all, Sophia found herself increasingly drawn to Yates. Unlike his more outgoing brother, he revealed himself slowly, through actions rather than words. She noticed his patience with a skittish colt, his fairness when settling a dispute among the ranch hands, his quiet generosity toward a family in town that had fallen on hard times. Their conversations grew deeper as trust developed between them. Sophia shared memories of her life in Boston, of Eleanor's gentle spirit and their father's failed business ventures. Yates spoke of the drought that had nearly ruined the ranch 5 years earlier, of his dreams for expanding their horse breeding program, of the responsibility he felt toward the land and the people who depended on it. 2 weeks after her arrival, Mrs. Hollister announced that the annual harvest dance in Camp Verde would be held the following Saturday. "The whole county attends," she explained over dinner. "It's quite the social event of the season." Samuel grinned at Sophia. "Perfect opportunity for you to meet everyone who's anyone around these parts, and for them to size you up, of course." "Samuel," Yates warned, but Sophia laughed. "I've endured Boston society matrons," she said. "I suspect I can handle the scrutiny of Camp Verde." "That's the spirit," Samuel approved. "Besides, Yates here is considered quite the catch. The Henderson sisters have been setting their caps for him for years." Yates shot his brother an exasperated look. "Pay him no mind, Miss Fairchild. The dance is simply a tradition. You're welcome to attend as my guest, with no expectations." "I'd be delighted," Sophia said, surprised to realize how much she was looking forward to the event. The night of the dance arrived with a flurry of preparation. Mrs. Hollister helped Sophia style her hair, arranging the dark curls in an elegant updo, adorned with a simple ribbon that matched her best dress, a deep blue silk that Eleanor had insisted she pack, despite Sophia's protests that it was impractical for ranch life. When she descended the stairs, Yates was waiting in the foyer, dressed in a crisp white shirt, dark vest, and neat trousers. His usual hat was absent, revealing hair the color of burnished gold, neatly combed for the occasion. The expression on his face when he saw her made Sophia's heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said simply. "Thank you," she replied, fighting a blush. "You clean up quite nicely yourself." Samuel appeared behind his brother, whistling appreciatively. "If the ladies of Camp Verde weren't jealous before, they certainly will be now." The ride to town was filled with anticipation. Camp Verde was small but proud, with a main street lined with buildings that included a general store, a hotel, a bank, and various shops. The dance was being held in the town hall, which had been decorated with autumn flowers and lanterns for the occasion. As they entered, Sophia was struck by the warmth of the welcome they received. Despite being newcomers, people greeted her with genuine curiosity and friendliness. Yates introduced her to the mayor and his wife, the town doctor, the schoolteacher, and numerous ranching families from the surrounding area. The music began, and Yates turned to her with a formal bow. "May I have this dance, Miss Fairchild?" His hand at her waist was warm and steady as they joined the other couples on the floor. Yates moved with surprising grace for such a large man, guiding her through the steps of the waltz with confidence. "You dance very well," Sophia observed, impressed. A smile touched his lips. "My mother insisted that Samuel and I learn. said no son of hers would shame her at social gatherings by clomping around like a draft horse. Sophia laughed, relaxing into the dance. She sounds like a formidable woman. She was, he agreed, his expression softening with memory. You would have liked her, and she would have approved of you. The compliment warmed Sophia more than she cared to admit. As they continued to dance, she became aware of curious glances from other attendees. One group in particular caught her attention, 3 young women standing with an older couple, all watching her and Yates with undisguised interest. The Henderson sisters, Sophia guessed quietly. Yates glanced in their direction and nodded. And their parents, good people, owned the mercantile in town. Before Sophia could respond, the music ended, and they were approached by a distinguished-looking older man with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Judge Peterson. Yates greeted him with respect. May I present Miss Sophia Fairchild? Miss Fairchild, Judge William Peterson presides over the county court. A pleasure, my dear, the judge said, his eyes twinkling kindly. We don't get many new faces in Camp Verde, especially ones as lovely as yours. You're too kind, Sophia replied, warming to his grandfatherly manner. Would you permit me to steal your partner for a dance? The judge asked Yates. My Martha is resting her feet, and I'd hate to miss this reel. Yates nodded graciously, though Sophia didn't miss the slight reluctance in his eyes as he released her hand. I'll fetch you some punch, he promised before stepping away. Dancing with the judge proved to be an education in local politics and history. He regaled her with stories of the early days of the territory, speaking of the challenges of establishing law and order in what had once been a wild frontier. The McKenzies have been the backbone of this community since its founding, he told her. Yates's grandfather was the first to bring civilization to this valley. His father served as mayor for 15 years, and those boys fine young men, both of them, though different as night and day. How so? Sophia asked, curious about how others perceived the brothers. Samuel's all flash and charm, quick to laugh, quicker to act. Yates is the steady one, thinks before he speaks, considers all angles before making a decision. Together they make quite a team. The judge's eyes twinkled. But it's Yates who holds it all together. Man of unwavering principle, that one. When the dance ended, Judge Peterson returned Sophia to Yates's side with a knowing smile. You found yourself a gem, McKenzie. Don't dawdle too long making it official, or some other fellow might steal her away. Sophia felt heat rise to her cheeks at the judge's presumption, but Yates merely nodded, his expression unreadable. As the evening progressed, Sophia danced with several other partners, including Samuel and the town doctor, while Yates fulfilled his social obligations by partnering with various ladies, including each of the Henderson sisters in turn. Sophia was taking a moment's rest, watching the dancers from the sidelines when one of those sisters approached her, a pretty blonde with a practiced smile. Miss Fairchild, isn't it? I'm Olivia Henderson. Her assessment was swift and thorough. Boston, I understand. You must find our little town quite primitive by comparison. On the contrary, Sophia replied evenly, I find Camp Verde charming and its residents most welcoming. Olivia's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. How fortunate! And how long do you plan to stay at Singing Springs? I understand these arrangements often include a trial period. The implication was clear, but before Sophia could respond, Yates appeared at her side, his presence solid and reassuring. Miss Henderson, he acknowledged with a polite nod. I see you've met Miss Fairchild. We were just getting acquainted, Olivia said sweetly. Such an interesting arrangement you've made, isn't it? Yates agreed, his tone neutral. If you'll excuse us, I believe this is our dance. He led Sophia back to the floor as a slower waltz began. "I apologize for Olivia," he said quietly. "She can be territorial." "Apparently your contested property, Mr. Mackenzie," Sophia observed, attempting lightness despite the unease the encounter had left her feeling. His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "Not contested at all," he said, his blue eyes serious as they met hers. "My interest lies in only one direction." The directness of his statement sent a flutter through Sophia's chest. They danced in silence for several measures, each lost in thought. "I've enjoyed our time together these past weeks," Yates said finally. "Getting to know you has been illuminating." "In what way?" Sophia asked. He seemed to choose his words carefully. "I came to appreciate your sister through her letters, or what I thought were her letters. Her intelligence, her humor, her compassion. But now I understand that those qualities I admired were yours all along." The music swelled around them as he continued. "I find myself wondering what might have happened if Eleanor had lived, if she had come in your place as originally planned. Would I have been disappointed? Would I have honored the agreement despite knowing something essential was missing?" "We can never know," Sophia said softly. "No," he agreed. "But I do know this: when I saw you step off that stagecoach, before I even knew your name or the truth of the situation, something inside me recognized you." His eyes held hers, unflinching in their honesty. "You're the one I wanted, Sophia, even before I knew who you were." The use of her given name, spoken with such gentle intensity, made her breath catch. In that moment, with the music surrounding them and the warm light of the lanterns casting a golden glow over everything, Sophia knew with certainty that her sister's final act of love had led her exactly where she was meant to be. "Yates," she began, but whatever she might have said was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance of the hall. A man burst through the doors, his clothing disheveled, his face urgent. "Fire!" he shouted. "Fire at the Henderson Mercantile!" The music stopped abruptly, and chaos erupted as people rushed toward the doors. Yates immediately took charge, his voice cutting through the panic. "Men to the water brigade," he commanded. "Ladies, gather buckets from the hotel and form a line to the well." He turned to Sophia, his expression grim. "Stay with Mrs. Peterson," he instructed, guiding her toward the judge's wife. "I need to help organize the response." Before she could protest, he was gone, striding purposefully into the night with Samuel and most of the other men close behind. The fire was visible from the town hall, angry orange flames licking at the night sky, illuminating the street with an eerie glow. Despite Yates's instructions, Sophia found herself joining the bucket brigade, passing water from hand to hand alongside the other women of Camp Verde. The entire town mobilized with practiced efficiency that spoke of previous experiences with fire, that most dreaded enemy in the dry Western territories. Men climbed onto rooftops to wet down neighboring buildings, while others fought the blaze directly, their faces streaked with soot and sweat. Sophia caught glimpses of Yates in the thick of the action, directing men, hauling water, helping to evacuate merchandise from the burning building. The sight of him moving fearlessly amid the danger stirred something profound within her admiration, mixed with a fear for his safety that revealed the depth of her growing feelings. For hours they battled the flames, and gradually, the fire began to yield to their efforts. By dawn, the mercantile was a smoking ruin, but the surrounding buildings had been saved, and miraculously, no lives had been lost. Exhausted townspeople gathered in the street, faces blackened, clothing soaked and singed, to take stock of the damage. The Hendersons stood before the remains of their business, shell-shocked and weeping. Yates approached them, his own appearance bearing testament to his efforts in fighting the fire. What he said to them, Sophia couldn't hear, but she saw Mr. Henderson straighten his shoulders and nod gratefully in response. When Yates finally returned to her side, he looked utterly spent, a cut on his forehead oozing blood, his clothing ruined. "Are you hurt?" Sophia asked, pulling a handkerchief from her sleeve to dab at the wound. "Nothing serious," he assured her, though he winced when the cloth touched his skin. The Henderson family lost everything, though. Their home was above the store. Sophia glanced toward the dejected family. "Where will they go?" "They'll stay with neighbors for now," Yates said, "but they'll need help rebuilding. The whole town will pitch in, but it will take time." His matter-of-fact assumption of responsibility for the welfare of others touched Sophia deeply. This was the man her sister had chosen for her, one who led by example, who considered the needs of his community as fundamental as his own. "I want to help," she said firmly. Yates looked at her then, really looked at her, taking in her soot-stained dress, her disheveled hair, the determination in her eyes. A slow smile spread across his tired face. "I never doubted you would," he said simply. The aftermath of the fire changed the rhythm of life at Singing Springs Ranch. Yates spent long days in town, helping to organize the rebuilding efforts for the mercantile. Samuel took on more responsibility for the daily ranch operations, while Sophia found herself coordinating relief efforts from the main house. Under Mrs. Hollister's guidance, she organized the collection and distribution of clothing, household items, and food for the Henderson family. Women from neighboring ranches gathered at Singing Springs to sew replacement linens and curtains, turning the dining room into a temporary workshop. It was during one of these sewing circles that Sophia truly began to feel accepted by the community. As they worked, the women shared stories of previous hardships, droughts, blizzards, Apache raids in the early days, and how the people of the valley had always banded together in times of need. "The McKenzie men have always led the way," Mrs. Peterson noted, her needle flashing in the afternoon light. "First old Abraham, then James, and now Yates and Samuel." "Yates is cut from the same cloth as his father," another woman agreed. "Quiet strength, that's what it is, the kind you can depend on when trouble comes." Olivia Henderson, who had been subdued since the fire, looked up from her sewing. "He's been at the site every day, directing the rebuilding. Papa says we couldn't manage without him." There was a new respect in her voice that made Sophia reassess the young woman. Perhaps her earlier hostility had been born of genuine affection for Yates, not mere social ambition. "Your family is fortunate to have such good neighbors," Sophia said gently. Olivia met her eyes, a moment of understanding passing between them. "Yes," she said quietly, "we are." As September gave way to October, the mercantile gradually took shape again. Meanwhile, life at the ranch continued with the rhythms of the seasons. Cattle were rounded up from summer pastures, the last hay was cut and stored for winter feed, and preparations began for the colder months ahead. Through it all, Sophia found herself increasingly integrated into the daily workings of Singing Springs. She took over management of the household accounts, applying her mathematics skills to the ranch ledgers. She learned to make soap and candles under Mrs. Hollister's tutelage, to identify edible plants in the kitchen garden, to preserve fruits and vegetables for the winter months. In the evenings, when Yates returned from town or from working with the cattle, they would often sit on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in brilliant colors. Sometimes they talked about the day's events or plans for the ranch's future. Other times they simply enjoyed a companionable silence, the kind that can only exist between people who are comfortable with each other. It was during one such evening, with the first chill of autumn in the air, that Yates turned to her with a serious expression. "The mercantile will reopen next week," he said. "The Hendersons are planning a small celebration. I'd like you to attend with me." "Of course," Sophia agreed readily. "I'm glad they've been able to rebuild so quickly." "It's what we do out here," Yates said, his gaze on the darkening landscape. "Rebuild, adapt, persevere." He was quiet for a moment before continuing. "It's been almost 2 months since you arrived at Singing Springs." The observation hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Their arrangement had never specified a time frame, but both understood that decisions would eventually need to be made. "Yes," Sophia acknowledged. "It seems both longer and shorter somehow." "Do you miss Boston?" he asked, watching her face carefully. Sophia considered the question. "I miss certain things, the libraries, the concerts, the bustle of the city." She smiled softly. "But no, I don't miss Boston itself. Not anymore." Yates nodded slowly. "Mrs. Hollister tells me you've taken to ranch life better than anyone expected. She says you have a natural aptitude for household management and a willingness to learn what you don't know." "High praise from Mrs. Hollister," Sophia said, warmth spreading through her at his words. "She sets a high standard." "The hands have noticed too," Yates continued. "They appreciate how you remember their names, ask after their families. Tucker says you even learned to identify the cattle brands of neighboring ranches." "It seemed important," Sophia said simply. "This is their world. I wanted to understand it." Yates turned to face her fully, his expression earnest in the fading light. "What I'm trying to say, rather poorly, is that you've become an essential part of Singing Springs, not just to the ranch, but—" He hesitated, then finished quietly, "to me." Sophia's heart quickened at the intensity in his voice. "These past weeks have shown me what kind of woman you are," he continued. "Brave enough to travel across the country to honor your sister's memory. Adaptable enough to embrace a life entirely different from what you knew. Kind enough to help strangers in need. Strong enough to face hardship without complaint." He reached for her hand, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "I know our beginning was unusual. Some might say our acquaintance has been too brief for what I'm about to ask. But out here, we learn to recognize value quickly in land, in livestock, in people." His blue eyes held hers steadily. "And I recognized something in you from the very beginning, Sophia." Understanding dawned, sending a flutter of anticipation through her chest. "Yates, let me finish," he said softly. "I want to be clear about what I'm offering. Life here isn't easy. Winters are harsh, summers are brutal. There will be good years and bad ones. But this land, this ranch, it's part of me. And I'm asking if you would consider sharing it, sharing that life with me." He drew a deep breath. "I'm asking if you would do me the honor of becoming my wife. Not because of an arrangement or a promise to your sister, but because I've come to care for you deeply. Because I believe we could build a good life together." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, not of sorrow but of overwhelming emotion. In that moment, she saw with perfect clarity the path that had led her to this place, to this man. Eleanor's last gift had been more precious than she could have imagined, not just an escape from poverty, but a chance at genuine happiness. "When I came here," she began, her voice steady despite her tears, "I was fulfilling what I thought was my sister's dream. I expected at best a practical partnership with a stranger." She squeezed his hand. "I never expected to find a home, or a man I could truly admire and love." The word hung between them, honest and unadorned. "Is that a yes?" Yates asked, a smile beginning to transform his face. "Yes," Sophia said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates McKenzie, not because of any arrangement or obligation, but because I choose you just as you have chosen me." He drew her into his arms then, his embrace warm and strong, and when his lips met hers in a first, tender kiss, Sophia knew with absolute certainty that she had found where she belonged. The reopening of the Henderson Mercantile, became a double celebration when Yates announced their engagement to the assembled townspeople. Congratulations poured in from all sides, with even Olivia Henderson offering sincere good wishes. "You'll be good for him," she told Sophia privately. "He needs someone with spirit to match his stubbornness." Judge Peterson insisted on performing the ceremony himself, and a date was set for the first Saturday in November, just enough time for the necessary preparations, but not so long that winter weather might interfere with guests traveling from outlying ranches. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of activity. Sophia wrote to her few remaining friends in Boston, sharing her news and explaining the remarkable circumstances that had led to her happiness. Mrs. Hollister and the ranch hands prepared singing springs for the celebration, while the women of Camp Verde rallied around Sophia, helping to create a wedding dress from the finest fabric available at the newly stocked mercantile. The day dawned clear and crisp, with just enough chill in the air to hint at the coming winter but plenty of sunshine to warm the festivities. The ceremony was held in the ranch house parlor, which had been decorated with late-blooming wildflowers and greenery gathered from the river banks. Sophia wore a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, with a lace collar that had once belonged to Yates's mother. Mrs. Hollister had woven wildflowers into her dark hair, and she carried a small bouquet of late roses from the ranch garden. Yates waited for her by the fireplace, looking more nervous than she had ever seen him, his usual composure replaced by an endearing tension. But when their eyes met as she entered the room on Samuel's arm, his face transformed with a smile of such pure joy that Sophia's heart seemed to expand in her chest. Judge Peterson conducted the ceremony with dignity and warmth, speaking of the responsibilities and joys of marriage in a way that acknowledged both its practical and emotional dimensions. When Yates spoke his vows, his voice was clear and steady, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. When her turn came, Sophia's voice trembled slightly, but her conviction was absolute. "By the authority vested in me by the territory of Arizona," Judge Peterson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. McKenzie, you may kiss your bride." The kiss they shared was brief but tender, mindful of their audience yet conveying a depth of feeling that made several of the ladies dab at their eyes with handkerchiefs. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with music and dancing, abundant food, and enough goodwill to warm the coldest heart. Samuel, in his role as best man, offered a toast that managed to be both humorous and touching, concluding with raised glass. "To Yates and Sophia, may your partnership be as fruitful as our land, as enduring as our mountains, and as life-giving as our river." As twilight deepened into night, the guests gradually departed, leaving the newlyweds to begin their life together in the home that was now truly theirs to share. Later, in the privacy of what was now their bedroom, Yates took Sophia's hands in his. "I have something for you," he said, retrieving a small package from his dresser drawer. Inside was a delicate gold locket on a fine chain. When Sophia opened it, she found a tiny portrait of Eleanor on one side. "Samuel helped me arrange it," Yates explained softly. "I thought you might want to keep her close to your heart. She gave us both an incredible gift." Tears welled in Sophia's eyes. "It's perfect," she whispered, deeply moved by his thoughtfulness. As Yates fastened the chain around her neck, his fingers brushed against her skin with a tenderness that spoke volumes. "I want you to know," he said quietly, "that while I'll always be grateful to Eleanor for bringing you to me, it's you I fell in love with, Sophia. You, exactly as you are." In that moment, surrounded by the quiet of the ranch house and the love of the good man she had married, Sophia felt the last piece of uncertainty fall away. This was where she belonged, not as a replacement or a substitute, but as herself, fully and completely. "I love you, Yates McKenzie," she said simply, reaching up to touch his face. His smile was tender as he drew her into his embrace. "And I love you, Sophia McKenzie. Welcome home." The years that followed brought both challenges and joys to the McKenzies of Singing Springs Ranch. The winter of 1886-1887 was one of the harshest in memory, with blizzards that swept across the territory, stranding travelers and threatening livestock. Yates and Samuel worked tirelessly to protect their herds, sometimes staying out for days at a time to move cattle to sheltered areas and provide emergency feed. Sophia proved her mettle during those difficult months, managing the ranch house with quiet efficiency while also organizing relief efforts for families in the valley who were struggling with dwindling supplies. By spring, when the worst of the weather had passed, she had earned the deep respect of even the most traditional ranching families in the area. Summer brought better fortunes. The ranch's horse breeding program expanded successfully under Yates's guidance, with several of their quarter horses winning recognition at territorial fairs. Samuel, inspired by his brother's happiness, began courting the new schoolteacher in Camp Verde, a spirited young woman from Denver who matched him quip for quip. In the fall of 1887, Sophia discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought Yates to his knees beside her chair, his face alight with wonder as he pressed a gentle hand to her still flat stomach. "A baby," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "Our baby." Their son, James Abraham McKenzie, was born on a beautiful May morning in 1888, arriving with a robust cry that, according to Mrs. Hollister, could be heard all the way to the bunkhouse. With dark hair like his mother and blue eyes like his father, he became the center of their world, adored by everyone at Singing Springs from crusty old Tucker to the youngest ranch hand. "He has the McKenzie spirit," Samuel declared proudly as he held his nephew for the first time. "Mark my words, this boy will run the biggest ranch in the territory someday." Parenthood brought new dimensions to Yates and Sophia's relationship. Watching her husband cradle their son with those strong, capable hands that could break a wild horse, yet be so infinitely gentle with their child, deepened Sophia's love in ways she hadn't imagined possible. For Yates, seeing Sophia as a mother patient, loving, and wise beyond her years only confirmed what he had known from the beginning. She was extraordinary in every way. Life settled into new rhythms as little James grew from infant to toddler to an energetic young boy who loved nothing more than to trail after his father and uncle around the ranch. By the time he was 4, he could identify every horse in the stable by name and knew the brands of every ranch in the county. In 1892, the McKenzie family expanded again with the arrival of twin daughters, Eleanor Rose and Margaret Grace. Sophia's labor was difficult, and for several harrowing hours, Yates faced the terrifying possibility of losing her. But with the skilled assistance of the town doctor and Mrs. Hollister, Sophia pulled through, presenting him with 2 perfect little girls who bore the sweetest combination of both their features. "You scared me half to death," Yates confessed when they were finally alone, sitting beside her bed with a daughter cradled in each arm. "I don't know what I'd do without you." Sophia reached out to touch his face, exhausted but radiant. "You'll never have to find out. We McKenzies are made of sturdy stock, remember?" The twins brought new energy and laughter to the ranch house. Eleanor, called Ellie by everyone, was thoughtful and observant like her father, while Margaret Maggie, to all who knew her, had her mother's curiosity and her Uncle Samuel's mischievous streak. Samuel himself married the schoolteacher, Hannah, in 1893, building a smaller house on the ranch property so they could remain close while having their own space. Their first child, a son they named William, was born less than a year later, giving James a cousin close to his age to adventure with across the expansive ranch lands. As the territory moved toward statehood, Yates became increasingly involved in local politics, serving on committees that helped shape policies for the future state of Arizona. His reputation for fairness and integrity made him a respected voice in discussions about water rights, land use, and relations with the remaining Native American populations in the region. Sophia, meanwhile, established a small school on the ranch for the children of the hands, eventually expanding it to include youngsters from neighboring properties. Her educational background, once considered excessive for a woman, proved invaluable as she taught not only reading and mathematics, but also practical skills adapted to life in the West. In 1895, on their 10th wedding anniversary, Yates presented Sophia with a surprise, a small but well-stocked library building he had constructed near the main house, filled with books ordered from publishers in the East and furnished with comfortable chairs and good lighting. "For the woman who loves learning as much as she loves this land," he said as he showed her the finished room. "May our children inherit your hunger for knowledge along with their McKenzie stubbornness." That evening, after the children were asleep and the celebration with friends and family had concluded, Yates and Sophia stood together on the porch of their home, looking out at the land that had brought them together. "Do you ever wonder," Sophia asked softly, "what might have happened if Eleanor had lived, if she had come to Singing Springs instead of me?" Yates was quiet for a moment, his arm warm around her shoulders. "I used to," he admitted finally, "in the early days, but not anymore." He turned to face her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "Everything that's happened since you stepped off that stagecoach has confirmed what I felt from the first moment I saw you. You were always the one I was meant to find, Sophia. Always." She leaned into him, her heart full. "I like to think Eleanor knew that somehow, that she understood you and I would be right for each other in ways she and you might not have been." "Your sister was a wise woman," Yates agreed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And I'll be forever grateful to her for bringing you to me, even if her methods were a bit unconventional." Sophia laughed softly. "She always did have a flair for the dramatic, much like someone else I know." She glanced meaningfully toward the house, where their son had earlier performed an elaborate reenactment of a cattle drive using his collection of carved wooden animals. "He comes by it honestly," Yates chuckled, "though I suspect Maggie will give him competition in that department." They stood in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge in the vast Arizona sky. So different from the future Sophia had imagined for herself all those years ago in Boston, yet so much richer, so much more fulfilling. "I was thinking," Yates said after a while, "about expanding the horse program further. There's increasing demand for our stock, and that southwestern section of the property would make excellent additional grazing land if we cleared it properly." "Always looking toward the horizon," Sophia observed fondly. "Someone has to," he replied with a smile. "The future won't build itself." "Speaking of the future," Sophia said, turning in his arms to face him, "I've been meaning to tell you something." His eyebrows rose in question. "It seems the McKenzie family will be growing again," she said, her eyes twinkling. "Sometime next spring, by my calculation." Joy spread across Yates's face, as bright and unrestrained as it had been when she told him about James, about the twins. Some things never changed, and his delight in their growing family was one of them. "Another baby," he murmured, drawing her close. Have I told you lately that you're the greatest blessing of my life, Sophia McKenzie? You might have mentioned it, she teased, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. But I never tire of hearing it. As they stood together under the star-filled sky, the ranch quiet around them, Sophia reflected on the strange, wonderful journey that had brought her to this moment. From a reluctant mail-order bride, stepping into her sister's shoes out of obligation, to a woman deeply in love with her husband, her children, and the land they called home. Eleanor had given her the greatest gift imaginable, not just escape from a life of hardship, but the chance to find where she truly belonged. With a man who had looked at her on that very first day and somehow known, despite the deception and confusion, that she was exactly who he had been waiting for. "You're the one I wanted," Yates had told her. And every day since had proven how right they both had been to trust that initial recognition, that sense of coming home to a place they'd never been before. Their fourth child, a boy they named Thomas, arrived in the spring of 1896, completing their family and adding new joy to the bustling household at Singing Springs Ranch. As the territory of Arizona moved toward statehood in the early 20th century, the McKenzies continued to prosper, their ranch expanding, and their children growing into capable young adults who carried forward the legacy their parents had built together. James eventually took over management of the ranch, working alongside his cousins to make Singing Springs one of the most successful operations in the state. Ellie became a teacher, while Maggie's artistic talents led her to become a well-known illustrator of books about the West. Thomas, the youngest, studied veterinary medicine, returning to the ranch with knowledge that benefited not only the McKenzie herds but the entire region. Through it all, Yates and Sophia remained the heart of Singing Springs, their partnership a testament to the unexpected ways that love can find us even when we're standing in for someone else, even when the path seems unclear. And on quiet evenings, they would still sit together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in glorious color, grateful for the twist of fate that had brought them together and the courage they'd found to embrace the life they were meant to share.